Hey, how's everyone doing? I'm Jamal Givens, and I'm on the chopping block at visceralchange.org. Yeah, definitely. So, like I said earlier, I'm Jamal Givens, and I have been working with youth and their parents for over 20 years, so about 21 years to be exact now. And what I primarily focus on is my mission actually is to inspire hope and ignite change that contributes to the well-being of adolescents. So that's really what I'm working on right now is just continuing to move in that fashion and motion to help youth and families be the best that they can be. And I realize that through time that there's a lot of tips, techniques, thoughts, ideas that I want to continue to share with parents that maybe either they've never learned, never thought of, or maybe perhaps they have and forgotten that they need to continue to do that. So when I say adolescents and working with them, I'm speaking more from middle school or junior high on up, even up into the first years of college. So the things that I primarily focus on are substance abuse, violence, mental health. So we're talking about suicide prevention, also things around anxiety, depression, psychosis, things of that nature. And then also, so doing workshops and trainings with those parents, and also giving a chance to people to go check out my website, jamalgivens.com, so that they can just pick up on a couple of little tips here and there on things to talk with their young one about. So it's been about 20 years now. With 21 to probably this year. Haven't added it up recently, but it's definitely 20, 21 years. And yeah, I just love it, man. I've been out in the community. I work primarily currently with minority students and helping them, again, to understand and think about some of the choices that they're making, the importance of those choices, and how they can either impact them negatively or positively. And so supporting them when they are making good decisions, and then challenging them when they're making the bad ones to say, okay, how do I look at that and how could I do it differently? I think what happened for me was just walking through life. All my years coming up, I was the guy that a lot of people would come to and just ask my opinion, or I would seem to be like the voice of reason. And it wasn't something that I intentionally aspired to be or do. It was just one of those things that was innately within me. And there was always be like, Jamal's just real calm. He's just real cool. Oh, dang, he gives good advice. You should go talk to Jamal. And over the years, it just happened. And so then when I went to college, it continued to happen. People asking for my input and suggestions. And I decided to join Big Brothers and Sisters of America out in Philadelphia when I was going to Temple University. And got an opportunity to work with some young men in the projects. And it was interesting to me just how they gravitated towards me, meaning like the single moms with their kids, because I was attending Temple University and I wasn't there on a scholarship for football or sports of any kind. I was strictly there academically. And so the love that I gained from being in that and just seeing how the positive impact I was making, I said, let me ride with this for a little bit, because my major was accounting. And I was like, oh, hold up, okay, wait a minute. And I started thinking, I was like, man, I don't know if I could be in the room, locked up all day just crunching numbers. I was like, I got to be out here in the community, moving and talking and helping. And so I switched my major to sociology at Temple, and then I transferred to the U of A and just continued that work, and was able to work in all the schools, primarily in Pima County. If not doing assemblies, workshops, working one-on-one with students that were at-risk youth, if you will, and also wanting to help them see that they can get into the pipeline to go to college. So it kind of just stumbled upon me, because I never really thought like, okay, what do I want to be when I grow up? Which I think is something that I wish I had done a little bit more, and having that type of thought. All I knew was that because my parents instilled it in me was, graduate school, you go into college, and that was it. I never thought about, well, what is it that I want to do? What can I be? But I was always this type cat that, like I said, was extremely social. Started my own business when I was in high school, doing DJing, and also had a band and would travel around and would perform for youth. So again, it was still there even in high school, but it was more for a fun type of deal instead of academic or socio-emotional development and things of that nature. And so it just transformed into that. So that's how, it's a long answer to your question, but so that's how I fell into it, man. And then after, after working with youth in the schools, so I was still in college at the time at University of Arizona. Then I graduated and got a job at a facility that was establishing the very first residential program in Tucson that was over a long period of time. So it was 30-day stay plus. And so I was, one of the new people that came on board, and I ended up becoming a senior residential counselor of that place. And so learned a lot, and my supervisor was there and taught me a lot. And so it was cool. And I just kept on that path. I think primarily my dad did a lot of that, even though he wasn't, we weren't in the same location because he was overseas at the time, still working. But we were always on the phone with him. My mom was extremely instrumental because she did a lot of reading and would always just coach us up on, spiritual principles and things of that nature. But as far as actually in the job, I would say that there were the supervisors and the even the colleagues or my peers that would help me and just see the positivity in what I was doing and give me tips. And so a lot of times we did team learning, if you will, we would debrief situations and issues that would go down. And so my supervisor, TK, was one of the first people that was really there for me, and he was extremely patient with the youth, and I just loved his vibe. And so I watched, and then he'd take time to just talk to me. And then there was another Dr. Joe Hassler, who really was there for me during those times and giving me tips and pointers and how to move and handle different situations. And so those are primarily the two people in the beginning, I would say, that were there for me. Thereafter, I was extremely blessed because right after that, I left the residential facility to get a bigger job, if you will, within the same organization, but it was a different project altogether. And then I got placed under a lady by the name of Amy Graves, who phenomenal, man. Wow. I mean, the conversations we could have, her ability for herself to want to grow, and she didn't hold that in for herself. She would share that, and we would then communicate and talk and try different things and make mistakes and learn. And man, it was a blessing. No doubt it was a blessing. Actually, it's a healthy balance because a lot of things aren't being offered in schools anymore like they used to, as far as social and emotional development. And so they need to sometimes bring in people to talk about things like substance abuse prevention. And back in the day, I think in the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of commercials out there and Schoolhouse Rock and this is your brain on drugs and just a lot of that kind of. Yeah, we can say if it worked or it didn't work, but that's to be debated. But at least it was information getting out there all the time and in front of you. When you think about the HIV/AIDS addiction epidemic that occurred, and then the crack epidemic, and none of that stuff today really is being discussed as much. But HIV and AIDS is on the rise, and then the only biggest thing that could be equated closely to a substance abuse issue with the effort and the money and the time being put into it is the opioids, which would be similar to the crack. Right. But with the crack, they didn't put nearly as much money behind it, and because it was in minority communities and things of that nature. But with this opioid issue, it's impacting a different community, and that community is yelling and screaming, and Congress and people are putting money behind that to help them. So in order to help our communities, educating them on substance abuse prevention before it becomes an issue is really important. So they asked me to come in and talk about those type of things. In addition to that, definitely suicide prevention is something that I talk with adults about more so than I do the youth. A lot of the training that I have, they allow it for high school students. Their I won't say legalities, but their fidelity is around, the middle school, or excuse me, the high school age students. And so you could train them on awareness as opposed to intervention. But suicide is a taboo word, and culturally, from religion to political to just people's understanding and misunderstanding of it, of shame and things of that nature, that they don't want to talk about it. But unfortunately, it's on the rise also, not only amongst our veterans, but our youth also, due to just things that are going on environmentally within our society. There's an increase in anxiety and depression amongst youth. And so it's important, and I'm glad that schools and some parents and businesses, I shouldn't say just schools, behavioral health places. I just did a training the other day for the Tucson Indian Center, where they're saying, okay, this is going on. How do we work with it? What skills do we need to have in order to help? So those are some of the probably bigger ones. And then mental health first aid is another one where we do deal with depression and anxiety. We also take a look at eating disorders and things of that nature to educate folks. That bullying one, it comes around. It was more hot, if you will, for lack of a better word, even though it continues to go on and every day throughout time. It maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, it was huge, and people were calling on me to do that. That's kind of subsided a little bit, but because we do have bullying awareness month and things of that nature around, I believe it's October or Unity Day. They do call during that time, but then I'll get calls individually from parents saying, hey, how do I handle this situation? How do I handle that situation? And I'll take the time to share with them. And people get in contact with me through my website, jamalgivens.com. I think it's getting more traction with the 18 and older, with the college students, because unfortunately they are being impacted by people that are having thoughts of suicide and seeing it, and then also people actually suiciding. And so the interesting thing about getting onto particular college campuses to do information on that is sometimes colleges don't want to acknowledge that is occurring even within maybe their housing or certain departments and things of that nature. Again, because of just the taboo-ness of it, and maybe it's weak, like I said earlier, and all the negative things that go along with that. However, I think there is an increase in people wanting to know what they can do. It's just like first aid CPR. Everybody's trained in first aid CPR, not everybody, but and how often do they really use that? But it's there to save a life, so you have that tool in your pocket. And so that's what we're hoping to do more of. Some colleges do have departments, the wellness centers and things of that nature that are versed in some of these trainings themselves. But again, there's only 2, 3, or 4 of those people, and how can they get to a whole campus or college community? And that's why I feel that they need to work with outside organizations and collaborate and figure out a way how to keep their young people safe, young adults. I like the word that you use, trauma. That's gotten a lot of traction lately. And for me, in the years I've been doing this, of course, there's always words that come out, or ideals or theories that, like I said, get traction. And that seems to be the big word nowadays, trauma. And through my years, I've always known that people are dealing with things sometimes, not sometimes, all of us are dealing with something, and it impacts us. It impacts us sometimes negatively. It's all about how we deal with it. And what I call those are risk and protective factors. So the risk factors, the more of them that you have, you increase the likelihood that you're going to get involved in negative behaviors or substance abuse, or be triggered with mental health concerns or issues. And so when you ask the question, what's the biggest issue, I think, for people, is just figuring out who they are, what they want to do, how do they do it. If you're especially if you're a minority individual, it's not just learning about yourself as a male or female or your family, where you fit in with your family. It's also, how do I fit into this world as far as a marginalized individual, especially in the climate we're in today. That's tough. And then who's having conversations with these young people, even young adults for that matter, to say, let's talk about this. How do you feel? And what are the positive outlets you can use so that you don't keep it bottled up inside and then exhibit negative behaviors and doing something that you can't take back. But having open dialogue about what it feels like, who you are, how do you maneuver through this, how do you keep your self-worth and not feel degraded, and how do you then find other people around you, but without also isolating yourself, because you still need to walk amongst and within other people. So I don't believe the answer, and what I share with young people, is to just congregate with our own, if you will, whatever that own is for you, but still finding a way to connect with people, but then also being okay with who you are and recognizing who you are, and that there are some negative things that people are attaching to that. That does not mean that you have to embrace those or internalize that, but recognize it, but then continue to find just a diverse group of people, intellectually, mentally, spiritually, that can help you walk to be the best that you can be. So I think that's, right now, I think that's what I'm seeing, is just people not, the marginalized folks feeling their voices being tainted, that they don't know where, they don't know how they fit in. They don't know where they go from here. I think primarily because I work on the South Side. The homogenous group that I do work with is primarily Hispanic Latinos. Amongst or within that is a smaller population of African American Studies Department will call me in and let me do some, ask me to do some things here and there. But it's a smaller population here in the state for where we are. So I think the message that I give is one that's for anyone to consider. For me personally, I don't. I do some diversity training to adults, but when it comes to youth, I don't necessarily do any training on that specifically. So I do see that it's, my message is important for all people, regardless of being marginalized or not, because the unfortunate part is, as much as the the families and or youth who are privileged, if you will, have the same issues. They just don't want to call it that. They don't want to call or recognize that their kids are having substance abuse issues just as much, if not more, than the kid on the South Side. They don't want to acknowledge that their kids are having thoughts of suicide just as equally as the kid on the South Side, because, well, how can they be having thoughts of suicide when they got this big house and I bought them this brand new car and but they still have pressures also that they're dealing with as an adolescent. And so I think the message that I give is for all people, and again, for parents to think about. But I think it's different in understanding how they're processing that depending upon where they are, as far as their privilege or their marginalization or their socioeconomic status or things of that nature. Yeah, unfortunately, there has been an uptick in the LGBTQ community, on suicides, on bullying, on mental health issues, on just almost on all the spectrums, if you will, or categories. That is sad. Whether I know it's politicized as far as LGBTQ community. Regardless of where you stand on that, man, these are human beings, and they're people, and for them to be going through what they're going through is tough, and we need to be supportive, regardless of in my opinion, our religious stance or our political stance. They're human beings, and they can contribute positively to this community. And one life lost is one too many, through bullying, through suicide, through ODing, overdosing on medications or whatever. And so that's probably the biggest group that I've seen that's had the most increase in the things that I deal with. I mean, it's sad. It's sad to say. And so what I try to do, actually, when we talk about diversity, inclusivity, is really talking about how do you engage and activate bystanders, not only from a bullying prevention standpoint, but even bystanders from awareness of suicide prevention, so that they can be aware, so that they can help. That's what we're supposed to be, in my opinion, a society about, that helps one another. We cannot walk through life doing it by ourselves. And I would agree, or I would argue, that we can't even do it by ourselves as an only race or ethnicity. That we have to be diverse, because everybody brings something to the table that can help us be better. And so, unfortunately, yeah, the uptick in the LGBTQ community is just on the rise, and we can do something about that. It doesn't have to continue to be that way at all. Work across different sectors, actually. So in suicide prevention and mental health, worked with law enforcement, definitely, here in town. And they're open to learning more, so much so that even when things occurred, I forgot how many years ago now, with Gabby Giffords, that occurred, they came out with some monies for training for law enforcement and things of that nature, that they've been open to learning, and we were able to train them. And in addition to that, when it comes to mental health and suicide prevention, at least in our city, they have established a unit within the law enforcement department of police, where they are the ones that actually go out and deal with mental health issues, and get trained additionally, so that they can work with these folks that are having mental health conditions, as opposed to the average police officer who's going in and doesn't know anything, is not recognizing the signs and symptoms, and ends up just wanting to use force in order to subdue an individual. So that goes to show that the work that has been done by many, as far as increasing the awareness of mental health and suicide, is resonating with some folks within businesses, organizations, and even politically, our different councilmen and women and supervisors. So it's really cool to see. I think it's slowed down a little bit overall, but in the communities that I work, the school district that I work in is always receptive and open and supportive in me coming in, and I'm their go-to guy and finding them resources. But when we look at other districts that are just in need, just as much in need as some of these others, they're not reaching out because they're scared about the stigma and the negative attention or the idea that we're not perfect. Because if you say that we need to bring in Jamal to talk about substances in a more affluent community, we got an issue. We can't have that. That makes our school look bad. Doesn't mean that it's still not happening just because you decide to turn a blind eye to it. It's there, it's occurring, but that makes their school look bad. That in turn could make their enrollments decrease because parents are like, well, I don't want my kid going there. But regardless of whether you choose to acknowledge it or not, your kid is having to deal with those issues because they're adolescent issues. Regardless. And so they need help. And not working on it doesn't help. So I think within this administration, as far as substance abuse is concerned, mental health, it has slowed down. And I'm hoping that things can pick up because it's not over yet. And I think there's coalitions throughout this nation who are working to make sure the issues stay in front of the administration and they see things differently. Again, I like the way that you said that, is that, you know, we all have similar issues, but there's some people that needs to be looked at a little bit differently. But sometimes those people are people that are not of color that need to be looked at also. And substance abuse doesn't look at color, or suicide doesn't look at color and your political views. And when I say teens increase in suicides and depression and anxiety, it's across the board. No, yeah, it's just me right now, getting things going and trying to just be, help people out, just trying to inspire hope, man, and ignite action that will contribute to the well-being of those adolescents.
Great. Now, how can we get in touch with you?
Yeah, definitely. You can reach out to me on Facebook, Jamal Givens JG. That's the one. That's my business page. And then you can reach me at what is my other one? YouTube. I do a YouTube channel with my son. Okay. It's called Jay-Z Talks. It's where father, son having conversations about things that are occurring with adolescents and getting a young person's perspective and a parent's perspective on that. And that's Jay-Z Talks on YouTube. Great. So that's where you can find me.
And what's the website?
JamalGivens.com.
Perfect, man. Appreciate you, baby.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks.